Welcome to the Explainer. Right now, at this exact moment, there is a bustling, incredibly complex microscopic world operating inside of you. We're talking about the cell, the fundamental unit of all life. It's so easy to just write it off as a tiny building block. But as we're going to see today, it's way more than that. It is literally a highly organized, autonomous metropolis.
To navigate this whole cellular metropolis, here's our roadmap for the Explainer. We'll start with a welcome to the cell, look at the two main types of cells, explore the cell's infrastructure, how they communicate, the cell cycle, and finally, wrap up with their ancient origins. Let's dive in.
Section 1. Welcome to the cell, the microscopic universe. Let's see just how massive this microscopic topic really is. 30 trillion. 30 trillion. That is the estimated number of individual living cells inside an average adult human male. Think about that for a second. You've got roughly 30 trillion autonomous entities inside of you right now, all performing distinct functions, replicating, and burning energy. You aren't just a single living being. You're basically a walking, talking universe of microscopic lives, all working in total sync.
And what's wild is how we even figured this out in the first place. This whole field kicked off way back in 1665, when an English scientist named Robert Hooke looked at a thin slice of cork under a really primitive microscope. He noticed this honeycomb-like structure and decided to call these tiny little enclosures cells. Why? Well, they actually reminded him of the small, bare rooms that monks slept in at monasteries. That one simple observation completely launched the cell theory that defines modern biology today.
Section 2. Two types of cells, villages versus cities. Now that we've got our scale down, let's look at the two fundamentally different ways life actually builds these units.
So life essentially comes in two distinct architectural styles. On one side, we have prokaryotes, your bacteria and archaea. Think of these kind of like simple ancient villages. They're tiny, they generally lack internal membrane-bound structures, and their genetic material is just floating freely in the center. But on the other side, we have eukaryotes, which make up animals, plants, and fungi. These are the massive, highly complex cities. They can be up to 100 times larger and feature a secure membrane-bound nucleus that acts basically like City Hall, closely guarding the DNA.
But hey, nature absolutely loves breaking its own rules, right? We normally think of prokaryotic bacteria as strictly microscopic. Well, researchers recently found a bacterium called Theomargarita magnifica. It is the largest known bacterium, and get this, it's actually visible to the naked eye. It stretches an unbelievable 2 centimeters long. It totally flips our assumptions about the size limits of a so-called simple prokaryotic cell.
Moving on to Section 3, the cell's infrastructure, inside the metropolis. Let's zoom right back into that complex eukaryotic city and survey its specialized organs, or organelles.
The internal infrastructure of our cellular city maps out perfectly. I mean, every city needs power, right? In your cells, that comes from mitochondria, which act as tiny power plants pumping out ATP. For manufacturing, you've got ribosomes in the endoplasmic reticulum churning out proteins like busy factories, while the Golgi apparatus plays the role of the post office, packaging those proteins up for delivery. When things break down, highly acidic organelles called lysosomes step in as the local recycling center to break down waste. And naturally, the whole operation is directed by the nucleus, the city hall where the original blueprints, your DNA, are locked safely inside a vault.
Now you'd think we have it all figured out, but surprisingly, not everything in this cellular city is fully understood. For example, some of your immune cells, like macrophages, contain up to 100,000 massive, membraneless organelles that biologists literally just call vaults. They're 3 times the size of a ribosome, yet their exact purpose is totally speculative. Maybe they transport material from the nucleus. Maybe they're structural scaffolds. Nobody really knows for sure. It just highlights how much mystery is still packed inside your own body.
Section 4. How cells communicate. The telecommunications network. Because those 30 trillion cells making up your body definitely aren't working in isolation. They need a hyper-sophisticated telecommunications network just to survive.
So here's signal transduction in action. It's basically how a cell hears a message. Step 1. A messenger molecule, like a hormone, binds to a very specific receptor on the outside of the cell. Step 2. This kicks off a whole domino effect inside, often using relay structures like G proteins to pass the message along. And step 3, that internal relay coordinates a critical response, like telling the cell to grow or to release an enzyme. It is an incredibly precise molecular relay race, and it's happening millions of times a second.
Cells rely on these communication pathways to constantly run negative feedback loops. It's exactly like the thermostat in your house. If it gets too hot, the AC kicks on. When it cools down, the AC shuts off. Your cells use chemical signaling to do the exact same thing, making sure everything from your metabolism to your hormone levels stays perfectly balanced. This state of stable internal balance is called homeostasis. Without it, the cellular city would literally fall into total chaos.
Which brings us to Section 5, the cell cycle, urban expansion. A successful city inevitably needs to grow, repair damage, and eventually reproduce.
This expansion process is just an elegant, tightly regulated dance. First up is interphase, where the cell grows, stockpiles nutrients, and most importantly, makes a complete duplicate of its genetic blueprint. Once everything is prepped, we hit mitosis. That's where the copied chromosomes are precisely pulled apart to opposite ends. Finally, cytokinesis physically splits the membrane right down the middle, dividing the city into two perfect, identical daughter cells.
And why does this cycle matter so much to you? Because it has these rigorous checkpoints to make sure DNA is copied flawlessly before any division happens. But if those checkpoints fail, say due to a signaling error or a genetic mutation, the cell just ignores the stop signs. The result is rapid, out-of-control division. In the clinical world, this breakdown in cellular law and order is exactly what we call cancer.
Section 6. Ancient origins of cells. A billion-year history. To wrap up this explainer, we need to look way back in deep time and ask, how did this breathtakingly complex metropolis actually get built in the first place? Tracing the grand history of life on Earth is wild. Roughly 4 billion years ago, life started out extremely simply, with the very first prokaryotic cells. Then, by about 3.5 billion years ago, we see the first hints of multicellularity, basically microorganisms sticking together using an extracellular matrix. But the real structural revolution, the one that actually made plants, animals, and us possible, that kicked off 2.2 billion years ago with the first eukaryotes.
And this leads right into one of the most incredible events in biological history. The complex eukaryotic cells making up your body today are the direct result of an ancient microscopic corporate merger called symbiogenesis. Get this, about 2.2 billion years ago, an archaean cell actually swallowed an oxygen-breathing bacterium. But instead of digesting it, they formed a partnership. The swallowed bacteria moved in permanently and eventually evolved into the mitochondria, the power plant we talked about earlier. You are fundamentally the product of two single-celled organisms deciding to team up.
So I want to leave you with a final kind of mind-bending thought. As you sit here listening to this explainer, you are a walking metropolis made of 30 trillion ancient, self-replicating, communicating entities. They are running power plants, packaging proteins, checking genetic blueprints, and talking to their neighbors. If your entire existence relies on this bustling society of trillions of microscopic organisms, who is actually in charge? It's a pretty fascinating perspective to ponder. Thanks for joining me, and keep exploring the amazing world inside of you.